Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this Thursday, November 23rd edition of Bang the Book Radio. My name is Adam Burke, your host for the next little bit under an hour. Let's go over all kinds of things in the world of sports from a betting focus. Happy to have you with me on this Thanksgiving holiday. One guest coming your way today, that is Mr. Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. We're recording this segment on Tuesday afternoon, so obviously some of these lines may have moved around a little bit. I do apologize for that. We'll kind of talk about the playable ranges here with these games on today's segment because some of these numbers probably will have moved by the holiday, but hopefully everyone got to their destination safely and you're enjoying some time with family here this weekend. A lot of things for us to be thankful for here at bangthebook.com. Specifically, I'm very thankful for my boss, Ryan, for giving me the platform and the opportunity that I have to bring you Bang the Book Radio and also to bring you so much written content that I provide over there at the website. I cannot say enough about how good he's been to me and to my wife and to my family. And, I'm just very, very thankful that I have the opportunity to do this and thankful for the listeners as well. Without you guys, we wouldn't have, guys and girls, I should say, we wouldn't have a show. So very happy, very thankful for all of you out there that listen to us every day, or if you just like one of our guests and just specifically listen to that guest, hopefully it's Brad Powers, so you're listening to this here today. But I just want to thank everybody out there for listening and thank everybody for their time and their efforts and their feedback and everything like that makes Bang the Book Radio the great product that it is. Before we bring Brad on, I just want to remind everybody, as we head into a very busy weekend here of college football and the NFL, NBA, NHL, college basketball, all the stuff that's going on, .com, we've got you covered. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. College football and NFL power ratings, NBA and NHL and college football situational betting articles, betting observations from a former college football player and current coach. We have a ton of stuff going on over there at the website, so please check all of that out. Finally, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio is presented by DSI Sportsbook. If you sign up over at DSI using the promo code BTB and the number 25, you'll get a $25 free bet just for signing up. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino. It's the holiday season. Maybe you can't handicap as much as you want to. You need to shop around for those best prices. Sometimes it'll be at DSI. Sometimes it won't be, but you have to make sure that you're putting in the effort to get those half points, those full points, the reduced juice, whatever it is that you're out there looking for. So you want to have multiple outs at your disposal. If you don't have one at DSI, that promo code gives you a good opportunity to sign up over there. One guest here on this Thanksgiving edition of Bang the Book Radio, that is Mr. Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. We chatted about a bunch of rivalry games, a bunch of betting topics, and all sorts of different things here. So here is that segment with Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. All right, I'm joined now by Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com for this week's Powers Picks segment. Brad, how's it going, buddy?
It's going well. Happy Thanksgiving to you, your family, and all the listeners out there.
Absolutely. I echoed those same sentiments in the intro here, and it's never a bad thing to mention Happy Thanksgiving. Good food, good football, that type of thing. One of my favorite holidays, just because I like the laid-back nature of it. I like Christmas. I love going out and buying gifts for people, and I love, seeing their reactions when they open them. But there's something magical about Thanksgiving and just getting into that food coma and then getting ready to watch a great weekend of football.
Yeah, it would probably be my second favorite holiday behind Halloween. Yeah, I am more of a Thanksgiving guy, and I'm not even that big of a turkey guy, to be honest with you. But, man, food, football, family, fun, the four maybe key F's of life. So I love it. So, it's definitely one of my favorite holidays of the entire year.
Well, we got a lot of college football to talk about here. It is rivalry week. It's hate week, whatever you want to call it. And we've talked about some of these concepts here throughout the week on the show. We had a really good show with Sports Cheetah on Tuesday where we talked about a lot of this stuff. Also some good insights from Brian Leonard and Wes Reynolds on Wednesday. So, Brad, I'll ask you some of the same questions that I asked them here. I know when we spoke with Rolf Michaels last week, he talked about kind of making some adjustments to his power ratings based on the fact that these are rivalry matchups. Is that something that you do, or do you just let the numbers play out, as they would any other week?
I let them play out, but keep in mind, when I post my power ratings, that's just pure power rating, what they are to this season. Now, it does factor in injuries and where they are this season, so if they're missing a quarterback like, Josh Allen or something for Wyoming like last week, obviously I power rated them down significantly as far as points-wise, but, when I post my pure power ratings each and every week, and you can get them at Brad Powers, the number 7 on my Twitter handle, that's just a pure power rating. Then what I go into is a multitude of factors. I mean, it could be a situation, it could be motivation, it could be series history, and specifically series history plays a much bigger part of my handicap of a game when it comes to rivalry week. And I tend to, especially when you're dealing with bigger point spreads, I tend to lean with the bigger rivalry underdogs, depending on the motivation. So, no, it's an entirely different thing, and it could be something that's worth, multiple points. I mean, if you got the situation, you got the motivation, you got the series history, you're a big dog. I mean, that definitely overrides, in my opinion. That's the rubber stamp, even over the top of my power ratings.
All right, we're going to hit on some of the same concepts that we touched on Tuesday, talking about teams that have 5 wins, teams that have nothing to play for, coaching changes, all that type of stuff. But we're going to use a different sample size of games here during Brad's segment. But, Brad, before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about this game on Thursday night. The Egg Bowl, Ole Miss takes on Mississippi State. The Bulldogs, a 16-point favorite here in this one. For Ole Miss, nothing to play for but pride and a rivalry trophy because they can get a 6th win, but they can't go to a bowl game, self-imposed sanctions. Matt Luke's last game as the head coach of this team because they're going to figure out somebody with more of a long-term status after the season. So, how are you seeing this one? I mean, this is a pretty big number with an Ole Miss offense that is pretty decent.
Yeah, it is. 16 is a little high in my opinion. I'd put the number at 14. Although my power ratings got it right at 16, so not much difference in my power ratings. But when you factor in the rivalry, you factor in the motion. The one negative for Ole Miss, short travel week. Not that it's a big travel, but boy, when you're dealing on Thanksgiving and you're on the road a little bit, that could be a little bit maybe distracting. But there's no question, Mississippi the preferred side plus 16. But I'll be honest with you, I probably like the over more than anything. You look at Mississippi State's offense the last couple of weeks. I mean, obviously you get some suppressed scoring because they're playing Alabama a couple weeks ago. I thought they were in a little bit of a flat spot last week against Arkansas, so that had their scoring down a little bit. I mean, if you've been betting the over in Ole Miss games all year, with the exception of last week, you've been cashing a heck of a lot of tickets. I fully expect them to have an open playbook here with a lot of trick plays in Matt Luke's final game as head coach. I mean, their games this year are averaging 68 points per game. And even in conference, it's actually 70 points per game, even in SEC play as far as a total average score. So I think there's some more value towards the over here. I expect a very loose Mississippi team, so I think there's correlation. If you like Ole Miss plus the points, usually when you like a dog, you're probably leaning towards the under. But in this case, if it plays out, I think the back door is wide open. Give me the Rebels plus the points and over 62.5.
Yeah, and I think that you're really onto something there. This Mississippi State defense in conference play has allowed 5.9 yards per play. They've only allowed 5.1 yards per play overall. So this is a Mississippi State team that really benefited from a weak non-conference schedule. Also last year, a little bit of an outlier. This was a 55-20 game, so it did go over the total last year. But Mississippi had 528 yards and only scored 20 points. So, maybe a little bit of regression to the mean there in that regard. Now, what about the revenge factor here in this game? Ole Miss, like I said, blown out last year by 35. They didn't play all that bad. They had over 500 yards. They just couldn't convert it into points. Do you buy into that revenge angle here in rivalry games?
There's no question. I mean, the fact that they were embarrassed, as far as this one, to me it's more revenge when you were, maybe the higher ranked team and you lost your season because of that game. Not necessarily you got blown out, but it does play a part. And I think Ralph Michaels says this a lot. Revenge to me is more when you were favored or even a big favorite and you got beat, or even the higher ranked team in the matchup and got weak the prior year. That's to me when revenge really plays a factor.
All right, well, let's move into Friday here, and let's talk about a game that's not a rivalry game, but I still think it's an interesting handicap for a variety of reasons. Game 131, 132 on the board. Miami takes on Pitt. Early kickoff here in the Steel City, but the Hurricanes favored by 14. And obviously Miami with that look ahead to the ACC championship game against Clemson, and there are some teams that are in very clear look ahead spots this week with regards to conference championships. But you've got a Pitt team that just isn't very good, and they won't make it to a bowl game. They only have 4 wins. So you kind of wonder what the effort level is going to be from the Panthers in this spot. Is this a game that you're staying away from, or do you have an opinion on it?
You know what? I won't go too much involved, but I'm more inclined to taking the points here. I'll take Pitt plus 14, and I agree with you. I'll tell you what, I am so excited because after Saturday I can start cashing a bunch of season win totals. Can you believe CG Technology had Pitt season win total at 7.5. Unbelievable. That was just a horrible mispricing there. But I'll say this, Pitt's behalf, outside the North Carolina debacle a few weeks ago, I've liked their trend line here in 3 of their last 4 games. That they upset Duke on the road. They beat me. I was against them in the Virginia game. That was misleading. They got outgained, but still won the game by 17. And then last week, very misleading, should have beaten Virginia Tech. I mean, they're at the goal line, 4 chances at the 1-yard line. 4. First and goal at the 1. They can't punch it in late. Virginia Tech stops them. Otherwise, they win that game outright on the road as a double-digit underdog. So they haven't given up on the season, and that's a little tip of the cap to Narduzzi, who I do think on the whole is still overrated, but his team definitely hasn't given up to him. To me, it's all about Miami's motivation. I mean, yeah, they can get up for primetime home games against Virginia Tech and Notre Dame and play like a top 5 team, but when they're a big favorite against Syracuse, against North Carolina, against Virginia last week, they play down to the level of their competition. In last week's game, misleading final, I mean, they're trailing 28-14, have to score the last 30 points of the game to make it close to the spread there. At 14, I'm willing to take Pittsburgh plus the 14. Not a premium pick, not a top play of the week, but definitely a lead there.
Well, let me play the devil's advocate side of that and say, as you just mentioned, Pitt on the 1-yard line, 4 chances to win that game. If they win that game, they still have bowl eligibility dreams. Now, they probably weren't going to beat Miami anyway, but they'd be sitting there with 5 wins. They'd have a shot to get to a bowl game. That's a pretty devastating loss there for them. And then you look at the Miami side of it, last week, like you mentioned, really flat spot, didn't come to play, misleading final score. Maybe that was Miami's scare, though. Maybe Mark Richt has, the motivation he needs to tell this team, guys, look what we almost did last week. Would have kept us out of the college football playoff if we won out, maybe. Mark Richt can say to his team, hey, boys, let's go up here, business trip, let's take care of business, and then move on to this Clemson game. So, I don't know. I kind of feel like you could look at it from both ways here.
Yeah, you can. Let's face it, you can look at both ways to almost, any game, any handicap. I mean, that's why the market's out there. But here's the thing, say they are more focused. And I'm willing to say, hey, Miami's not going to be as flat as what they were last week. I expect them to come out with a lot more energy than they did last week. The problem I would have is the second half. If they get out to a lead, I mean, are they going to start putting players away? Because, I mean, they do have the game of the year, at least for them, against Clemson in the ACC championship game on deck. So, I mean, to me, if you're looking to bet Miami, and I could see that, I'd be more inclined to lay it with them in the first half because I think they could allow the back door. And we've seen at least Pittsburgh be competitive now with regards to, Pitt not having the bowl out there. I get it. But this is the final home game at Senior Day. It's a relatively proud program. And it's a program that's thrived against some of the bigger boys. I mean, remember last year, they're the only team in the country to beat Clemson. That one was on the road. They also had, they beat Penn State, a team that ended up playing in the Rose Bowl. So I don't think they're going to lay down and die here, not from at least from what I've seen. But you're exactly right. Pitt not having a bowl carrot out there to be had is the reason why they're not a premium pick for me and a lean only.
And that's a really important thing you brought up about the second half. Excuse me, I don't know what's going on here, but that's a really important thing you brought up about the second half with North Texas, Florida Atlantic, Miami, Clemson, Wisconsin, Ohio State. All these teams have bigger things to worry about next week. Now, of course, with Ohio State in the rivalry game, I highly doubt that that's something that they worry about. Maybe Clemson, too, playing South Carolina. I don't know. I happen to think that game is going to be closer for comfort than the line would indicate. We'll talk about that one here in a few minutes. But, yeah, you do have some teams that have bigger things to look forward to here in subsequent weeks. So, maybe going first half as opposed to full game with some of those, a much smarter proposition. This isn't a rivalry game, Brad, but I want to crowdsource opinions on it. Game 137, 138. South Florida, Central Florida, number up from 8.5 to 11 at DSI and pretty much across the market. Although Matchbook, the offshore exchange, as we're recording here on Tuesday, at 10.5. And again, to our listeners out there, I apologize if some of these numbers have moved around quite a bit by the time you hear this on Thursday. But, man, 11 looks like a lot in this game. But at the same time, South Florida has played literally nobody.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is by far the best team that they played, probably by, if you're just doing pure rankings, probably by 20 or 30 spots. So they're definitely taking a much higher level step up in class. But I'm gonna be on the take here. It's too much for me. My number is pretty much 9 on the game. I couldn't go to double digits with Central Florida. They beat me last week. I had Temple plus the 14, but I mean, the major reason would be the fact that UCF was plus 5 turnovers, and there was one point in the first half where they scored 21 points on like 24 yards of total offense. Temple just kept turning over deep inside their own territory, setting up Central Florida for quick scoring drives there. I mean, Central Florida got outgained by about 13 yards in it despite a 45-19 victory. So, to me, I'm not a huge Charlie Strong fan. I think he's a good hire for this particular job. You know, questionable motivation for them almost all year, being a big favorite that, you know, they blow a game in the final minute against Houston. That pretty much is probably, without question, the best team they played so far. The fact that they lost at home to the only top 40 or 50 team they played, that says something. But I expect a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. To me, Quentin Flowers is still one of the best players in all of college football. Got a chance at 1,000 yards here rushing, doing his job. You know, accuracy a little bit of a problem here. He's completing less than 55% of his passes, but he's got a good touchdown interception ratio. I'm going to be on the take. And you said maybe not a rivalry game, but hey, I don't know if they can keep Scott Frost here, but man, it would be cool if Charlie Strong and Scott Frost could keep their jobs for the next 5 years, because I think it could become one of them, you know, a sneaky good rivalry there in the state of Florida.
Yeah, and that'll be an interesting thing, because I think the players probably fully know that Scott Frost is gone, and it seems like Nebraska's the obvious fit for him, and that's probably where he'll end up going. But they've got this huge game this week. They've got the Memphis rematch next week if they beat South Florida, and let's be honest, they probably should. You know, and then you go on to a bowl game, and you know, we'll see what the ceiling is for this team as an undefeated team if they knock off Memphis, who, by the way, Memphis is a really, really good football team, much better than they were when these two teams played the first time around. So that'll be an interesting game for Central Florida here in a couple of weeks. But you know, that's always a consideration here at this time of year, is that, you know, you have these coaching situations where players either know the coach is going somewhere else or know the coach is going to be fired. And that questionable motivation level is something that can be really hard to handicap. Not in this case, obviously, with an undefeated team, but there are some other situations out there this week where it's just teams that I don't really want to touch.
Yeah, and look, I'll go use Tom Herman last year, and if you just went through Houston's schedule, you know, especially after, you know, the hot start that they had with a win over Oklahoma, they were kind of a play against team at the end of the season, with one exception, the home game against Louisville. So they were able to, you know, push past those distractions that they had there with Tom Herman, you know, with up for all those jobs, and get up for one game. I think that would be the case here. I expect Central Florida to be up. You know, the motivation's not a question for me in this handicap. I just think they're laying a little bit too steep of a price in the fact that, you know, they've had a lot of blowout wins. But I'll be honest with you, I thought the price point for them has been a little steep. They had failed to cover 3 straight prior to the Temple game. And again, I thought the Temple game was a little bit misleading. So it's not, to me, it'd be more of a worry maybe next week, Memphis, as the final game of the season. But when you got an unbeaten season and everything's still out there to be had for you, I don't know if it's necessarily a distraction. It will be a play against on them probably come bowl game time. I'll be looking to fade Central Florida, particularly if they're in a big bowl game. And, you know, Scott Frost is, you know, who knows? I mean, we're all pure speculation at this point, but who knows if he's even there. They're playing with an interim or he's got to split time. I just don't expect him to be here when the 2018 season kicks off.
All right, let's go to Saturday here and hit on a few games that we haven't touched on throughout the week. How about game 155, 156 here? North Carolina takes on North Carolina State. Nice rivalry here. This is a fascinating game to me because this is one of those spots where you look on rivalry week and you see a big number. And you look at what North Carolina's done the last couple of weeks. They won on the road at Pitt, blew out Western Carolina last week. NC State's just played a tough schedule, and they really tripped up when they played good teams, but they've handled themselves well against bad teams. North Carolina is a bad team, largely because of injuries, but this is also a team that's still playing really hard. So I think this is a really interesting number here with the Wolfpack laying anywhere from 16 to 16.5.
I'm going to be on the take. I like what I've seen from North Carolina, and it just hasn't been coming off the bye against Pittsburgh. It was the week before against Miami where I thought they outplayed the Hurricanes. They actually outgained them in that one, held Miami to 59 rushing yards. I thought North Carolina, particularly after the Virginia Tech game where they lost 59-7, would be a dead team, and they looked like a dead team, you know, the previous 3-4 weeks. I thought they'd roll up and lay up and die, and kudos to Larry Fedora, who I think, you know, he's not one of my favorite coaches. He's pretty inconsistent, but I thought he's done a nice job here and deserves another season there The injuries have taken their toll, but, the bye week reset, some of these younger players have been forced into action. It's a positive. I mean, just the natural trend line should say as you get more playing time, you should get better, and we've seen them get better. Even an impressive performance winning cover last week against an FCS team, getting more than 2 touchdowns here in a rivalry week where I think, NC State, questionable motivation for them. And look, it's a rivalry game, but they won last year as a double-digit underdog in this rivalry. What do they have to play for at this point other than senior day and you're playing your rival? Because at 7-4, the major bowl bids, long gone at this point. They have no ACC implications. They lost last week, which was a little bit misleading. So anything above 14, I'm going to be on the take, and you're going to hear this a lot during rivalry week. I'll take a big underdog here. I expect to be motivated.
And I think what's so important to keep in mind about a game like this, and I'll look through the odds screen here and try to find one that's the opposite, but you have this North Carolina team that has a bad record, but as we just talked about, they've been giving a max effort. They've been playing really well as they roll into this rivalry game, and now you walk into a spot where, they're catching 16, but I think they honestly feel like they can win this game, and who knows? I mean, they very well could, because like you just mentioned, NC State did it last year as a double-digit dog. So I feel like you've got a buy sign on a team going into a rivalry game that's playing well, playing a bunch of young players that can say, we finished 4-8, or we finished 3-9, but the way that we wrapped up the year gives us some positive morale, gives us some good momentum going into the offseason and looking ahead to spring practices. I think those are the types of dogs that you absolutely want to play on here in these rivalry games. Sometimes the number's big because one rival is just a hell of a lot better than the other. This is a case here where NC State's a much better team, but North Carolina's effort level is so high that that's a team I'm willing to back, even if they aren't very good.
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, it could be a season saver for them. Can you imagine? I mean, if they won this game, won their last 3 games of the season, the positive momentum that they'd have, it'd be excused because they had so many injuries, but the fact they won 3 straight, be positive as far as the recruiting front. There'd be a lot of positive going forward. And again, I get NC State's, playing the rival here, but I got to question it. I mean, a lot of their hopes and dreams that they had just a few weeks ago, everything that was out in front of them got squashed against Notre Dame and Clemson. Last week was a sloppy performance by them, losing to Wake Forest. Again, I expect NC State to be motivated, but you're exactly right. I expect North Carolina to be max motivated here. And again, play with a little bit of chip on their shoulder. They view themselves as the big brother in this rivalry, and the fact that they're catching more than 2 touchdowns, they can feel a little disrespected here.
All right, let's go to a really, really tough handicap. At least I think it is. Game 161, 162. Vanderbilt takes on Tennessee. Tennessee a 1-point favorite here. I really don't think the odds makers wanted to favor either one of these teams, but throwing up a pick, probably not the way that they wanted to go about putting out an opener for this one. Tennessee with an interim head coach in Brady Hoke. Vanderbilt giving up points over the last several weeks. They're just not a good football team right now. Do you see an edge in this game, though? I mean, do you feel like this is one of those spots where a Vanderbilt team that has not played well, just sort of rises up for the rivalry game, or do you feel like, their problems just run too deep?
Yeah, I think their problems – look, I want to fade both teams. It's a shame that these two teams play one another because it's been a nice spot to play against both teams at the end of the season because, I mean, there's not much to like from Vanderbilt. I mean, since the Kansas State game, I mean, you can make a case that they're one of the worst Power 5 teams in the entire country. I mean, in conference play, they're getting outscored by 26 points per game, getting outgained by 206 yards per game. You look at Tennessee, I thought they gave a solid effort last week, kind of wore down late against LSU, but they did have the yardage edge in that game, only limited LSU to 281 yards. In conference play, they're getting outscored by 21 points per game. They're a little bit better. I'll be honest with you. I think Tennessee's these teams are about equal. You factor in, I can't give Tennessee full home field advantage like that they've had. I would say Tennessee. I'm going to lean with Tennessee minus the 1. Questionable motivation for both teams. Both teams kind of playing it out. You would think, Derek Mason would have a little bit more going for him. The fact that he's, the head coach, and he'll be given 1 more year next year. But I just think Tennessee's a more talented team at home. Give me that minus 1.
All right, how about a game that's not a rivalry-type game here, but I do want to touch on it because it's an interesting line move, and again, this is the line move as of Tuesday. Maybe this thing's moved back in the other direction by Thursday. Game 179-180, Southern Miss and Marshall. Marshall's down to a 2.5-point favorite at some shops here. This number opened 5, so we're crossing through the key numbers of 3 and 4. Is there an injury situation driving this line, or does the market just like Southern Miss?
I think the market likes Southern Miss. As far as the injury, I know Marshall, one of their top wide receivers, was banged up a little bit, but other than that, I think we're seeing, the market be against Marshall 2 weeks in a row. I mean, last week on game day, you saw the money show up hot and heavy on their opponent, UTSA. That was a pick'em game all week, and all of a sudden that line moves to Marshall +3. Defensive battle. It's not like Marshall was clearly the wrong team, but, there's a lot of, I would say, as far as injuries for Marshall, a lot of things undisclosed and a lot of guys questionable. So I'm not going to jump all the way in on Marshall until I figure out the injury situation later in the week. But I'll be honest with you, at 2.5, I would be more inclined to lay it with Marshall. I think these two teams, I almost have power rated dead even. Marshall's got a pretty solid home field advantage, probably closer to 4 than it is to 3. Pure power rating says the Thunder and Herd are the lane here, but definitely check out the injury report because there are a multitude of Marshall players that are listed as questionable as we're taping on Tuesday.
All right, we'll slide back up the board a little bit, and this is one of those games I was kind of looking for a little bit. Game 171-172, Northwestern takes on Illinois. Northwestern up from a 15-point favorite to 16.5. This could very well be 17 by the time our listeners are hearing this. You've got a Northwestern team that's 8-3 on the year. They've played pretty well, but this is pretty much the stopping point for them. Then they'll just look ahead to going to a bowl game. Illinois, on the other hand, started 2-0. They haven't won a game since. They've dropped 9 straight. They're 0-8 in Big Ten play. Blown out by Ohio State last week. Did play fairly well against Wisconsin, Purdue, and Indiana the previous 3 weeks. Is this a spot where you've this sleeping underdog heading into a rivalry game that you want to back, or is Illinois just that bad that you can't touch it?
They're that bad. I can't touch them. I can't touch them at all. Although, defensively, they're not terrible. Even in conference play, they're only giving up 33 points per game. That's respectable. But, they don't have a quarterback. You look at Jeff George Jr., their leading passer, has a negative touchdown-interception ratio, so does Chase Crouch for them. But they just don't have anything going. And look, they're playing right in the hands of the strength of Northwestern, which is on the defensive side of the ball. They're coming off a shutout against Minnesota in some poor conditions. They got a great running back, Justin Jackson. Thorson's, had a little bit of a step back this year. I think he misses, Austin Carr, the wide receiver from last year. And you look at outside of the Duke game, which was game 2 for Northwestern, been a pretty solid effort. So, losses to Wisconsin and Penn State, that's not too bad. And they benefited from a relatively soft schedule, the fact that they avoided Ohio State and Michigan. An overtime win over Michigan State. I'm buying this team, and I bought them at the start of the year. 7 was their season win total at CGT. I'm very happy. Looking forward to catch a ticket. 16.5. I'm gonna lean it with Northwestern. They take this rivalry pretty seriously. They blew out Northwestern last year, 42-21. Won on a neutral site by 10. And they've kind of owned it here the last couple of years. I think they just put a rubber stamp and step on the throat of Illinois and mercifully end the season for the Fighting Illini.
2 games I really like here, and they have a lot of similarities to them. 187-188, Colorado, Utah. 191-192, Old Dominion, Middle Tennessee State. We'll start out west in the Pac-12 here in Salt Lake City with this Colorado and Utah game. Utah, an 11-point favorite at open. Number down to 10.5 on Tuesday afternoon, so not a significant move here. But both of these teams are well coached. I like McIntyre. I like Whittingham. Both of these teams also going for that all-important 6th win to get to a bowl game. So is this just one of those rare pure handicaps in Week 13?
Yeah, I think it is. I think you can't question the motivation of either team. They both got to win. I like the situational spot for Colorado coming off a bye. Utah coming off, a game that they should have won on the road against Washington. A very emotional loss there. They blow a 7-point fourth-quarter lead, allowed the last 10 points of the game. Pure power rating, I got Utah, slightly better. On the game, to me, 8 is my number. So at 10.5, you got to bet on me for Colorado. This is, of all the games we went over so far, Colorado plus the 10.5 is my preferred choice and my best bet so far. It's a very close rivalry. You look at last year's game decided by 5, the year before 6, year before 4, the year before that 7. I mean, every single game is decided by single digits, it seems like. And, again, with Colorado coming off a bye with max effort here, catching 10.5. And here's the thing with Utah. They have issues as far as turnovers go. You go back to the game 2 weeks ago against Washington State, where I thought I clearly had the right side for Utah. They outgained Washington State. They have 7 turnovers in the game, lose it by 8. That's a major concern for me if you're looking to back Utah, especially in a double-digit favorite role, and they're prone to turn it over. And let's face it, outside of the UCLA game where they're facing a backup quarterback, what has there been really to like here? I mean, the team's 1-6 their last 7 games. You're telling me they're laying 10.5? No, the value for me is on Colorado plus the points here. Buffs are a premium pick for me.
Yeah, this is one where I don't get the line. I know Utah has the head-to-head advantage, but Colorado is so much better the last 2 years than they were previously. I mean, McIntyre's done a great job building up that program. You mentioned off the bye. Also, one of the things I think is kind of a factor here in this game is that you have these 2 teams with 5 wins. Last year, Colorado won 10 games, was in the Pac-12 championship game. Utah, the last 3 years, they've won at least 9 games under Kyle Whittingham. This is not a spot that Utah is accustomed to being in to where they need to win that final game to get to a bowl game. Colorado, yeah, they're not where they were last year, but this is a team that hasn't made back-to-back bowl appearances since 04-05. And they want to do that. They want to try to maintain the standards that this program set last year. And maybe 6-6 isn't that necessarily, but going to a bowl game is important for the boys from Boulder. So this feels like it's just a wrong line, and I'm kind of surprised. I don't know if it's because odds makers are so worried about the other marquee games on the board or what, but I think it's rare to have a number that's off like this deep into the season.
It is. And I mean, Utah's been a good spread covering team, but you start going through some of their performances, and I mean, I just don't see it with Utah in this particular spot. Now, I backed them each the last 2 weeks. With that being said, I thought I've had a pretty good feel for Utah games for the most part this year. Backed them at home against Stanford, but man, laying digits with this particular team, I don't think it's the ideal situation. I think they're overrated. They started the season off 6-0 against the spread, but I'll be honest with you, when you start going game by game through all of them, the only really impressive cover that they had there was against USC on October the 14th. Other than that, I mean, it just hasn't been that great of a season for the Utes. And I question, they made a big-time change schematically on the offense side of the ball. And I think, hindsight, that was a mistake. Utah's bread and butter was playing physical at the line of scrimmage, line them up and run them at you. Most of the Pac-12 teams outside of Stanford don't do that. I thought that's what made Utah really good the last, 10 years under Whittingham, and they got away from that. And I can't trust them laying in double digits here, especially when they don't have the passing attack to lay that kind of number.
All right, so we'll go back to game 191, 192 here. Old Dominion and Middle Tennessee State, another one where you've got to battle for a bowl game. Middle Tennessee 5-6, Old Dominion 5-6. Old Dominion's won 3 straight, so they're kind of pulling that Miami of Ohio that we saw last year, where the Red Hawks were 0-6, roared their way into a bowl game. Monarchs here were 2-6. Now they have a shot. And what's really hard about this game, I think, with Middle Tennessee State favored by 12, is that Old Dominion's playing very well, but they've beaten Charlotte, FIU on the road, which was an impressive win for them, and then Rice at home by 3. Middle Tennessee State, I don't think we fully know what we've got with this team now that Brent Stockstill's back in the fold. I think you've got 2 good coaches here in Rick Stockstill and Bobby Wilder. Love the coordinators for Middle Tennessee State. This is a really fascinating game here to where, again, you look from a power rating standpoint and the line's probably fairly close to right, but it doesn't profile as a blowout game.
Yeah, I agree. My pure power rating is about 11.5, so I mean, we're nowhere near around a key number here, so maybe slight lean for me on ODU. And it wasn't just, the last 3 wins. I started getting impressed with them. I mean, I really faded them against North Texas. I thought North Texas would destroy them, and they kept that one close, only lost by 7. When they got Lowry back at running back, and that actually went back to the Western Kentucky game where they only lost by 4 at home there. The last 5 games have been a pretty solid look for them. They look like a bowl-caliber team. Middle Tennessee, obviously the injury to Stockstill, it's tough getting a power rating on them because he missed most of the season. It's kind of been look, they won a couple games against UTEP and Charlotte, 2 bad teams. And then, you look at the market was against them last week. They were favored, but it ended up closing around Pick'em. They end up losing that game, a misleading, very high-scoring game against Western Kentucky. That game was 10-3, I think, in the late third quarter. So maybe a slight value on the under in this one just because of that one. But I'm not going to get too involved. But, again, it's going to sound like a broken record. If I'm not going to get too involved, and if I have to, I'm going to be more inclined to take a motivated team with a lot to play for, getting double digits. Give me Old Dominion.
Especially an Old Dominion team that made a bowl game for the first time in program history last year. Oh, and by the way, it was in the Bahamas. So, that doesn't suck if you're going to a bowl game. Middle Tennessee's been to a bowl game the last 2 years in the Bahamas and Hawaii. So I don't know where these two teams would slot in the bowl projections with a win here in this game. But, if your carrot at the end there to get to a bowl game is to go to an island as opposed to playing in like Birmingham or Shreveport or something like that, hell yeah, you're going to be motivated to go. So I think we should see a max effort here from both of these teams. And I like games like that this week where you can take out some of that uncertainty because you can't really quantify motivation. You try to put yourself in the mindset of these players. It's just hard. But when you get a pure handicap, like the last two games that we've talked about, I think they're a godsend on a week like this.
No doubt. And you can get them. I love this week. Number one, because of the rivalries. Number one, because it's always win or lose. It's always, kind of a breath of fresh air. And I love college football. It's like one of the loves of my life. But I'll be honest with you, week 13, you're looking to get just to, breathe a little bit as far as, seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. And I love bowl season. But you're exactly right. Sometimes you question the motivation, and that you could fully take advantage of that, especially with the team just playing out the year against a team with motivation. That's great. But in these particular spots, it just comes down to pure power ratings, matchup, and if you got two teams equally motivated, it just comes down to how good you are as a handicapper, whether it be the power rating or the situation, the matchup edge. I love it. So usually I have one of my better weeks of the year on Thanksgiving.
All right, two rivalry games I want to hit on here. These ones are a little bit more high profile out in the Pac-12. Let's start with the Territorial Cup, Arizona State. This game's a pick'em right now, game 207, 208. And again, by Thursday, there's a decent chance that this number will have moved. Somebody will have tipped their hand out there on this game. Brad, what's your hand saying on this game? Right now it's a pick'em. Arizona with Khalil Tate, very, very hot team. Arizona State. I still feel like even though we're 13 weeks into the season, I don't know what I'm going to get from them. So you got a strong opinion on this game?
I lean towards the home team here in the pick'em spot. My numbers have them favored by 1, so not an incredible advantage here. I do think Arizona is a slightly better team. Again, Arizona State's very high variance. I have backed them a lot here, starting with, I think, going back to the Oregon game, I've almost backed them nearly every single week. I just thought, they were a little bit mispriced. Everyone was down on them because, they barely beat New Mexico State, lost to San Diego State, lost to Texas Tech, when the reality was that wasn't such a bad performance. They really only disappointed me twice here since week 3, and that would be the USC game and UCLA games. And that kind of gives me pause because they did disappoint me in that ones. But last week was an easy, dominating win over Oregon State. Just a slight lean for them. I think Arizona got a little bit overpriced in the marketplace. Everyone fell in love with Khalil Tate. You look at them the last couple, 2-3 weeks, they haven't been covering numbers like they were the first 4 games that Khalil Tate took over. So I still think they're a little overpriced in the marketplace. Lean on Arizona State here. Not sure I'm going to have a best bet, though.
And this feels like one of those games, and I think you kind of alluded to it there based on the number that you have, is that Arizona is the better team, but, man, Tempe is a really, really good home field advantage. And I think that's kind of the reason why, we're seeing a pick'em here. Where do you think this number goes? Do you think we see the sharp involvement on Arizona?
Yeah, we've seen money on it, with the exception of last week, and I think there's an excuse for last week because Justin Herbert's status for Oregon, obviously changed, and that's why the money was against Arizona. Yeah, if I'm going to predict where the line goes, if you're looking to back Arizona State, I'm guessing wait later in the week. I think you're not going to catch 3, but I think you might be able to catch 2 on them and go ahead and bet them on the money line later in the week. I do expect the money to roll in on Arizona. I expect them to be the sharper side here.
All right, one more game that we're going to hit on here. That is the Civil War in Eugene between the Ducks and the Beavers with the Platypus Trophy on the line. I can't believe the trophy is actually a platypus. This is actually the first I've heard of that as I was sort of going through here and looking at this game. But you've got Oregon here as a 25.5 or 26-point favorite Last year, Oregon State picked up the win in this game, first time in a long time for them to take home the Platypus Trophy. Justin Herbert makes a big difference here. There's no doubt about that. But Oregon State is one of those teams that, I kind of alluded to a little earlier where they had that little bump when Corey Hall took over. The last few weeks, they just haven't been competitive. They kind of shot their load, so to speak, in that Stanford game, which they probably should have won, by the way. Last 3 weeks, Cal scored 37, Arizona scored 49, Arizona State scored 40. This is one of those spots where you've got a team at Oregon State that just hasn't played well at all. But this is a rivalry game. So is this one of those true rivalry game type spots where the underdog that's been down and beaten the last several weeks actually steps up? Or do you think the Ducks, with Herbert back, can go out there and cover this big number?
The line seems too pricey for me, and I've upgraded the Ducks a touchdown with Herbert back. Looks like, obviously, the markets, and maybe they're right. I was making a case. Look at Oregon with Herbert at quarterback. They're outscoring their opponents by about 3 touchdowns per game. Without him at quarterback, those 5 games, they're getting outscored by 3 touchdowns per game. So basically a 42 points per game difference with Justin Herbert in the lineup. So maybe I just, the touchdown hasn't been enough for me. Maybe I should have been upgrading them by 10 points or more. 26 seems a little steep. I do expect a prideful effort out of Oregon State. They're definitely a lean plus 26 for me. My power rankings call for them as one of the stronger plays of the week. But I'll be honest with you, I'm more confident in the over. I'm not sure. I'm not fully confident they can stop Oregon on the offensive side of the ball. And let's face it, Oregon with Justin Herbert at quarterback, entirely different. This is one of the stats of the week. They had more passing yards against Arizona when Justin Herbert came back. And it's not like he lit the world on fire. He was 14 out of 21 for 235 yards. But that 235 yards was more passing yards than Oregon had in the previous 4 games combined. They hadn't topped 75 yards of passing in any of the previous 4 games. So they're a completely different team. They have a pass attack. Then that opens up Freeman and the entire rest of the offense. So while I have a lean on Oregon State plus the points, I'm much more inclined to taking the over.
A lot of excellent insights here on today's show from Brad Powers of BradPowersports.com. Brad, what's going on over at the website right now, man?
Yeah, BradPowersports.com is the website. You can, every week, you can download past issues of the Powers Picks newsletter. We're off a great week last week, went 4-1 in college, and a couple of nice plays, including one of our top plays on UL Monroe last week. So you can check out past issues of the Powers Picks newsletter if you're interested and say, hey, this looks like something I want for the rest of the season. Well, it's $49 for the rest of the season. It's just not college football. It's the NFL as well. You get power ratings on every single team. You get weekly write-ups on every single game. It'll cover all 40 bowl games, and I will give a star-rated pick on every single bowl game. Now, a lot of it might be like a one-star type of lean type of thing, but you'll get that on all 40 bowl games, plus the national championship game, plus the rest of the regular season in the NFL, the playoffs all the way through the Super Bowl. It's $49 for the Powers Picks newsletter.
You can follow Brad on Twitter at Brad Powers and the number 7. Brad, thank you so much for recording with me early in the week here. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family, and I'll talk to you again next week.
Hey, sounds good. Thanks for having me on. Happy Thanksgiving out there to everyone.
Really strong stuff there on today's show from Brad Powers of BradPowersports.com. Coming up on our Friday edition of Bang the Book Radio, Westgate Super Contest selection segment with myself and Wes Reynolds, who's pinch hitting this week for Sports Cheetah. Then also Brent from DSI Sportsbook with the odds report. Now, I should be able to record that on Thursday afternoon. If I can't, Brent will send me a number of a list of games with the sharp action, the line moves, all that type of stuff, and some comments from him. So I'll just read those off here on the air. But we should be able to record with him there for that Friday edition of the show. So that'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Like I said at the top of the show, thank you to my boss, Ryan, for the platform. Thank you to all of our listeners out there that listen, that reach out, that give us the opportunity to do this show, and hopefully we've helped you along the way. So just thanks going all around to everybody here on this Thanksgiving holiday. But that'll do it for me, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.